Although I am a member of the Church of Satan, I do not speak for the Church of Satan. Welcome, one and all, to the Undertaking Satan Podcast. This is your host, Grendal, and this is episode 9. What are we talking about? Well, we're getting back to the segments with Rippin' It at the Gym. Roll that intro.
Alright, everyone.
Oh, God. Oh, no. Oh, I shouldn't have had that second burrito. Oh, no. Please, no. Please, no. Oh! I'll go get a towel. Undertaking Satan presents Rippin' It at the Gym. And we are back. Thank you so much once again for joining me here. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. If you want to check out everything that's associated with the Undertaking Satan podcast, I would suggest going over to the Undertaking Satan landing page. That is undertakingsatanpodcast.com. Also, over there you'll be able to find a link to an email. That's the best way to get into Grendal's mailbag. I had a lot of fun with this one. I had a lot of fun getting back into the segments and exploring some. Hope you enjoy it. Hit it. Welcome everyone to this edition of Rippin' It at the Gym. This is where we talk about everything fitness related, weight loss goals, that sort of stuff, everything that you need to know about that from the perspective of a Satanist and or a mortician. This has been one of the most unexpected segments to take off just because I didn't think anybody cared about this stuff. When I was originally putting together the show, I figured, well, it's kind of nice to have a lifestyle thing just to kind of fill out the roster, so to speak, but I really didn't think that it would resonate with folks, but it clearly does. And I do want to say on a personal note, thank you for checking in. I've had a lot of folks reach out, kind of offline, so to speak, and, through the social media stuff, just to see how I've been doing with everything. I'm going to give that report real quick. So the whole weight loss goals thing started really back, I would say late December 2023. Here we are in June of 2024, and I'm about 40 pounds down. That's pretty good. Actually, that's really good. I have a little bit of a skewed standard because, as I've mentioned in other episodes, I did combative sports, wrestling, MMA, things like that. Wrestling for a long time, MMA for a very little amount of time. But I've always been, from a young age, cognizant of weight and bringing weight down when needed and all of that. So really the biggest issue for me has been not taking the weight off too fast. And I'm going to go into that a little bit here as well. This segment, if it had a capstone, is the idea of having a goal for your weight loss. And I don't mean that in just an amount of pounds lost, or if you're working on building physique or building strength, a number of reps you can do or a weight that you can lift. I'm talking about having a goal for weight loss in general, or having a goal for why you want to make this change. And everyone's, I want to be healthier, I want to look better, I want to look better naked. I think every human being on the planet thinks that way, and that's not what I'm talking about. Those are very general goals. What we need to talk about is a goal of what you want to do, right? You've got to have some vanishing point, something on the horizon that you're working toward, or it's going to be for nothing. That goal for me has changed over the years. For a lot of people, it's sex, right? No, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Well, maybe some buts. But it's, attracting partners, that type of stuff. Well, I'm not an old guy, but I'm in my 30s, and I have a partner that I've been with for a long time. I'm satisfied with my sexual desires and all of this. So, going out and looking good in the bar or on Tinder or whatever really isn't a motivation anymore. And it goes back to that old school mentality when it comes to like cutting weight and all of that stuff for sports. I need something to show up for. So this is kind of letting a cat out of the bag, but I haven't talked about it much on the channel, but old Grendal here is a pretty big professional wrestling fan. Always have been. I'm what they call a smart mark. I don't believe wrestling is real or any of that, but I am very invested in watching it and seeing the storylines and getting into the biographies of the wrestlers, seeing how the business progresses from a event standpoint. Funeral directors are in part event planners. So I remember like the last event that I went to, wrestling show that I went to, I was more entertained by watching how the camera guys moved and how the folks setting up bits, setting up props and things in the ring area worked, watching the announcers and when they went on break and things like this, how they worked the commercials in. That sort of stuff was almost as interesting to me as some of the matches were. All this is to say is that my goal, my vanishing point is I want to go to professional wrestling school. It's a bucket list type of thing. I'm under no illusions that I'm going to be the next Hulk Hogan. However, I do want to learn to work, as it is said in the business, and I want to at least have that in my repertoire. I don't care really if I end up being a referee or if I just, end up working promotions or if I end up, booking or anything in the wrestling realm is fine for me. But I do believe in a ground up sort of approach, and you need to learn to work. So how does that work in with weight loss and all of this? Well, there's something in wrestling called working safe or being safe. It's the idea that you've got to protect yourself, your opponent, everyone in that ring, and it's a lot easier to do that if you're in shape. If you watch any wrestler, I'm a fan of the Mark Calloway Undertaking Podcast. Check that out. It's rife with stories about people who have a good gimmick, but they don't really know how to work. They don't know how to do things safely. They attempt to do things that they're not really qualified to do, and they end up injuring themselves or injuring someone else. So that's my main motivation. I don't want to show up there being a giant tub of lard. I really do not, for my safety and the safety of everyone around me. That is an example of a goal, a milestone, a reason why you want to do this, because everybody tells themselves they want to look better naked, and then they just pull up their favorite tube site, and after they're done and cleaned up, they just go eat some ice cream. It's not really a big enough motivating factor. You have to have something specific, and of course, it's just my opinion. I want to take a look at the entire weight loss perspective from both the satanic perspective and from the funeral directing perspective. So I'm going to talk about Satanism first. There's no real definition of success for a Satanist. That's left up to each individual Satanist. This is outlined everywhere in Satanism, every work, from the Satanic Bible to all the subsequent works. So I can't sit here and say that everyone out there needs to be a skinny mini and look like a Ken doll or be a professional wrestler or whatever. But I can say that for my own personal definition of success, this is required. And I've done a lot of looking. I've done a lot of kind of soul searching, even though I don't believe in a soul, on, hey, is it just time to relax and just, enjoy your food and just balloon up and just be that fun fat guy at the party? Because there's some success in that. That might be someone's version of success. And that leads me into this kind of new age movement, this idea of fat positivity, the idea of healthy at any size, the idea of the plus size movement, whatever you want to call it. This idea that everyone's beautiful and, you have to accept that. I have a lot to say about that from a satanic perspective that'll take up way too much time. But suffice to say that I think I can be relatively safe from a satanic standpoint in saying that, your definition of beauty is not everyone else's definition of beauty, and I dislike the idea of people forcing those ideas down people's throats like, hey, you have to think I'm pretty at 350 pounds. No, I don't. As I said, there's a lot to be said on this topic, but it does remind me real quickly of what Anton LaVey said about typecasting yourself and the idea of glamour and being attractive to people using what you have. And this is the idea of, he uses sensuality, sexuality, and I can't remember the other word he uses, but I'm just going to call it extremism. The idea of looking odd or weird and getting people to look at you, having the command to look in that perspective. If you can't be pretty, you can be outrageous. If you can't be handsome, you can be debonair, that sort of stuff. Again, a topic for another time. But what I'm trying to say is that I did look at that. I did look at the idea of, there's something to be said about being fat and happy. Oreos are good. Is that something that I want to do for my own personal definition of success? And the answer was no. I'm not going to let myself go that far. I'm still young enough and good enough condition to where I can still change my body. This gets into another related satanic concept of lycanthropy or lycanthropy. LeVay wrote a great article on this, and it doesn't really have to do with weight loss, but it does have to do with entering into a situation as being afraid in a psychodramatic sense of the word, and then returning to that same situation once you've changed your appearance to be more ferocious or more in control. The werewolf idea is there, and the idea of, trick-or-treating on Halloween and why we do dress up and have, these psychodramas for ourselves. Speaking of ideas I'm going to talk about later, the idea of professional wrestling as a psychodrama is a wonderful topic that I'd love to delve into. I hope I get a specific person on here to talk about that. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, if they're listening. But I digress. So that's a satanic perspective on it. And then this is a channel about mortuary issues. This is about funeral directing and embalming and all these things. We're all kings and queens and pawns, but we go into the same box at the end of the day. I do hold some value in that, and I think that it's an interesting dichotomy for me where I live a life full of stratification and standards, but then I have this, one little soft spot where once you're deceased, you're out of that game. However, I can't beat around the bush about the fact that I don't want to die fat. Just because of the things I see behind the scenes, I want to, again, reiterate that these are my opinions and this is for me and my body. Sometimes you just receive a deceased into your care and you feel really, really bad for them just because their family wants them presented to the public and they don't look their best, and it's just really kind of embarrassing for the deceased. At least I guess they don't have to care anymore, but for the family as well. There's actually a great video by a lady by the name of Caitlin Doty, I believe is how you pronounce her name. She's kind of a controversial figure in the funeral directing realm. Folks either love her or hate her. I tend to take a third side perspective, but she's a great video content creator, and she has a video on dying fat. I will try to remember to link that in the description of the video if you'd like to check it out. But it's all about, the idea of when you die and you don't fit into a standard size casket, caskets cost more when they're oversized. At the cemetery, you might have to buy 2 cemetery plots. If you're big enough. If you are in a casket that is bigger than a standard sized outer burial container or vault, you might be required to buy one that will suffice, and that's going to be more money. Embalming large people takes a large amount of fluid and generally costs more. There are funeral homes out there that have what they call bariatric charges that handle offset extra personnel that they would need to receive the person into their care. Again, I feel for families in those situations because nobody wants to pay more money. Nobody wants to have a bad viewing experience. These are all things that you have to take into account when you're dealing with obese individuals. So that is the funeral directing side of that as well. I just don't want to die fat just because of these things that I see around me. And I know that that's really harsh, but this is Undertaking Satan, folks. You should probably be used to it by now. Again, I've lost 40 pounds. Does that make me an expert? No. I've been losing weight and yo-yoing back and forth all my life. Does that make me an expert? Absolutely not. Am I a dietitian or a doctor or a medical professional who can give you advice on weight loss and things of that nature? Absolutely not. If you're going to be doing anything weight loss related, please consult the proper folks, physicians, trainers, people with the licenses and that are smarter than me. However, this is my show, and I'm going to go into some tips and tricks, things I've figured out, just sort of some arenas I found myself embroiled in or looking at that have been tricky or otherwise problematic to deal with. First thing on my list is how the fitness community has changed now. I remember back in the early 2000s, there was very little information on weight loss. Now it's everywhere, man. All these fitness people online, all giving conflicting advice. What do you listen to? What do you not listen to? I'm just going to talk briefly about how I've navigated that stuff. So the first thing is you got to figure out what your goal is. Are you a weight loss person, or are you a person who's trying to build your body? Are you a person who's trying to get more flexible? That's going to directly correlate with the major goal that I talked about at the beginning of the segment of what it is you want to do with this new body. And the issue that I see most often, especially when it comes to somebody in my situation, wanting to go to wrestling school, I'm wanting to drop weight and I'm wanting to build muscle. And the big idea seems to be, the big conflict is, do you do those things separately or at the same time? Now, what I have landed on is separately. And I know there's going to be folks out there saying, man, you're wasting a lot of time and, that's not the right way to do things. I'll go over that argument real quick. I've actually trained this way before, back in my past when I was training for an event that I had to lose over 70 or 80 pounds, I believe it was, and it ended up being up near 100 pounds. I did this and it worked fine, but it was a lot different scenario. I had a personal trainer. I had a gym that was very focused. I do not have that now. I'm on my own. So this is the idea that you're doing exercises that build muscle and burn fat at the same time. And I hate the term burn fat because it's a misnomer. What you're burning is calories, really. And yes, that translates into losing fat. However, the term burning fat or burning carbs is another one I hear, which is possible, but we're getting really into the scientific weeds on how that all works. Calorie is the focus. Calorie needs to be the focus. How many calories you're intaking into your body and how many calories you're burning with your activities, not only when you're in the gym, but throughout the day. Actually, I think it's called basal metabolic rate. And that's the idea of how many calories you just burn sitting around living. How many calories it takes to move the food through your body and breathe and regulate your blood pressure and do all the stuff that you do just to stay alive naturally. And then when you're working out, that's actually about only 5% of your daily output. Now that can be off-putting as well. You're like, well, if it's only 5%, why work out? That I think can be pushed if you're really working out aggressively, and at the end of the day, 5% is 5%, folks. It's nothing to laugh about. Back to the concept of trying to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. It's just not realistic for me because I can't be in the gym as much as I need to be in order to do that. I can't do the types of workouts that I did back then for a lot of different reasons. Timing and just how much time I have during the day being the biggest factor. So what I've decided to do is to go the more, I suggest, old school way. This is kind of, I feel like this information's been around forever, but it's thermodynamics. It's calories in versus calories out, right? Then we get into the topic of starvation and all of this stuff and the idea of like keto and getting your body into a fat burning state during more time in the day. Again, I'm throwing all that stuff out the window just because it's too faddish. You just can't. It's not reliable, okay? It's a chick in yoga pants with a nice ass telling you this, and the ripped dude who looks like that, he's Chippendale's dancer, just trying to use peripheral methods of persuading you that this is the best way. They're salesmen. So basically, I've went to the old calorie deficit idea, right? And there are things online where you can check your basal metabolic rate. It's basically just submitting your age, your height, your weight, and your activity level. And then it can kind of judge for you how many calories you would need to intake during a day. And then that changes, the more weight you lose. I'm going to redo it about every 10 to 15 pounds. Some people say to do it more, some people say to do it less. But right now what I'm at is about 1,700 calories a day. 1,700 calories a day of input. And then going back to that protecting your muscle idea, I am eating high protein. Your body needs protein, your body burns protein, and specifically it burns protein when it can't get to fat. So that's the reason why you see all these big bodybuilder dudes and they're talking about eating, all buku calories a day. And it's the idea that they are trying to protect their muscle that they built because they don't have very much fat. Also, your body needs a certain amount of protein every day to maintain muscle and for daily bodily function. So I'm eating high protein, but I am specifically looking at calorie deficit. And for me right now at the recording of this, that's about 1,700 calories a day, trying to spread that around throughout the day, trying to not eat after supper time, after 5 o'clock. That really doesn't have much to do with anything except for you tend to make bad choices after 5 o'clock. Speaking of bad choices, another thing I am doing is I have completely cut off of alcohol. Again, this is a satanic channel. We're all about indulgence and not compulsion. I want to do an entire episode on my favorite beverages for our other segment entitled The Good Stuff. Might do that here in the coming months. But right now, I've realized that it's not so much the alcohol that's a problem. It's when I have a few drinks and I'm hungry, I'm more likely to grab the bad stuff, right? Or extra calories. Speaking real briefly about another concept that's hotly debated in the fitness community is the idea of, are there good calories and bad calories, right? My answer to that question is two-sided. One is no. That's basically the answer. Just because calories are calories, it doesn't really matter where you're getting them. However, if you are eating lower calorie foods, you can have more volume of that food. So I don't have the stats in front of me, folks, but if you eat a handful of Oreos, that's like an entire giant salad, right? And that giant salad is going to make you feel more full. It's going to have vitamins and nutrients in it that the Oreos do not, but Oreos are delicious. So there's that whole realm. And that's another thing, heated debate that people talk about. You can get fat eating nothing but chicken if you eat chicken all day, every day. It's harder, but you certainly could get fat doing that, depending on your body type and all of that stuff. You see what I mean? You see how complicated this is and how complicated it's become? Kind of the last point I wanted to drive home here, and this is something that I've had a hard time with, is the idea of failing, and the idea specifically of failing and then getting back on the horse. Going back to the calories here specifically, I know this has been kind of a food topic more than a gym topic, but I'll get to that in a minute. I realized something just in the last few days. A little story time. So here's what I was going to do. I was going to shave off 5 pounds. I did last week's episode 8, and I knew I was going to do this topic, this segment for this episode 9, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to shave off 5 pounds. I want to be in a good spot when I'm recording this. And that was going very well. Sticking with my 1,700 calories, seeing, weight come off of the scale at a very nice rate. And then I got sick. So I realized something is that when I'm sick, there's really kind of 2 types of sick in my mind. What I had was like a head cold with a sore throat and all of that, kind of the itchy eyes. I don't know if it was allergies or something else, but it didn't really affect my appetite, but I just felt like shit. And in that situation, it's really hard for me to deny myself anything that I want food-wise, just because you feel like such crap. If I want to have some cookies or I want to have, whatever, I'm going to have it. And I did. But then, you blow up your calorie deficit, and then you're like, hey, fuck, I got to get back on. And this is where I feel like I've messed up in the past. And a few of you folks out there, if you're on this journey with me, so to speak, you might be doing this as well. So you're like, hey, I had a bad day, I had a bad few days, whatever. I'm going to knuckle down and get really back onto that 1,700 calories or whatever it is. I might even knock it down to 1,600 to kind of punish myself. That's completely the wrong way to do that. In my opinion, it never works. You fight yourself. So I call it the running start method. As of the time of this recording, day before yesterday, I really felt like crap. It was the third day of a 3-day sickness. I was eating whatever I wanted, but I was getting better. So I had crap, right? The supposed bad calories. I'm using quotations that you can't see. Then today, I woke up feeling better. I'm like, okay, I could probably get to the gym today. I could probably, do some more moving around, get some work done. And instead of jumping right back into that 1,700 calories, I still let myself eat as much as I want, but I train myself going back to the good eating stuff, right? The high protein stuff, eggs, cheese, all that sort of stuff that I generally meal prep with when I'm doing well. And then tomorrow I go back down to the 1,700. So it's the idea of sort of cleaning yourself out a little bit. Yeah, I was eating junk. Today I still don't feel great. I'm going to eat whatever I want as long as it's not, sugar and excess carbs and crap. And then the next day you're back down to your goal where you need to go. It gives you a little bit of a breather, a little bit of a reset, a little bit of a running start. And that seems to be a little bit better for me. Give yourself a break a little bit, and it tends to work out for you. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the gym just a little bit. This is, after all, ripping it at the gym. So I have been getting there, but I've been doing a lot of cardio. I've been doing a lot of stretching. I've been doing a lot of things that burn calories, get the entire body involved, but I'm not specifically worried about strength training at this point. And that's going back to what I was talking about when we opened the segment. That has its time and place, but I need to get some weight off first. And that's probably for those folks out there who are no, you shouldn't do that. You should, lose the weight and gain the muscle at the same time because it saves time and all of this. Yes, you're right. I understand. You're right. But my lifestyle, factoring it in, this is what I got to do. I've got to get the weight down, then I've got to start bringing the body back up. I do like my gym where I'm at now because it's pretty laid back. In my area, there's probably 4 or 5 gyms that I could choose from, ranging from like your Gold's Gym bodybuilder type of fucking shit all the way down to like the strip mall, 24-hour access, doesn't even have a shower type of thing. I'm kind of in the middle, in kind of a wellness center-ish type of YMCA sort of vibe. And that, I think, is a little bit of everything for me without being in too intense of an atmosphere, because I don't want to be in too intense of an atmosphere, not in that part of the progress. I think you can see what I mean when, for me, going too hard can be the issue, and that's the issue that I'm fighting. But all in all, it's going to be great. Grendal's going to become a professional wrestler. Ooh, fun. And that will do it for this installation of the Undertaking Satan podcast. This was episode number 9. As always, hail Satan. Bye now.